Hello. Thank you for joining us here for the first Toolkits Fiction live broadcast of 2019. Before we start this evening, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm broadcasting to you from stolen and unceded lands, and to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, Nations as the traditional custodians of the land on which the Wheeler Centre stands. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and to express my gratitude for their extended and continuing hospitality, and to also acknowledge that the Wurundjeri people have cared for and looked after this land for many thousands of years, and that we continue to benefit from their teaching and wisdom. My name is Jennifer Down, and it's my great pleasure to facilitate the Toolkits Fiction program again this year. So Toolkits is a rigorous 12-week program for writers aged 30 and under to develop their skills in a unique and exciting online environment. I'm sorry, I'm not having tickets on myself. That's the official line. Each program includes one-on-one mentoring with me and feedback from an established writer. I'm established now. Specialised presentations from guest artists, and the opportunity to network with other young people in the same literary form. Along with its sibling memoir, graphic narratives and poetry programs, Toolkits is administered by Express Media, which is a vital organisation essential to the literary arts and broader communities. It's acknowledged widely and also broadly valued as the peak organisation for young Australian writers aged between 12 and 30. And for the past 30 years now, Express has been developing, supporting and promoting young writers through workshops that develop skills, through opportunities for constructive feedback and publication, through awards and programs that recognise excellence. You might know them as the publishers of VoiceWorks. You might know them as the custodian of the Cat Muscat Fellowship, or as the producer of events like the Making Tracks program, workshop series rather. They're a really great organisation for young people, and there's always new things popping up on their website. The Toolkit program is digitally based, which is the thing I love most about it. It means that you can participate wherever you are in Australia, so long as you're on the World Wide Web. And it is made possible through the generous support of the Copyright Agency Cultural Fund. Toolkit's live sessions like this one this evening are presented by Express Media in partnership with Regional Arts Victoria as part of the Arts Connect series funded by the Federal Government's Regional Arts Fund. So this is the third year that I've facilitated the Toolkits Fiction program, and truly, really one of the greatest joys each year has been getting to hang out with really amazing guest artists. And tonight I'm joined by the immeasurably talented Jamie Marina Lau to talk about setting, world building, space, place. We don't know yet, but that's where we're going to start. We have lofty ambitions. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Jamie's debut novel, which I'm going to pinch here, Pink Mountain on Locust Island, was published by Brow Books, an Australian imprint, in April 2018 to wide acclaim, and it received a slew of prize shortlistings, including it was shortlisted for the Readings Prize for New Australian Fiction. It was shortlisted for the Stella this year. It was shortlisted for the New South Wales Premier's Award for Fiction this year also, I believe. I didn't write that down. And the ALS Gold Medal. And Jamie also recently signed on for another 2 books with Brow Books. Gunk Baby, yes, and is it Fuji?
Yeah. Yeah, nice.
It didn't exist yet. Well,
Yeah.
I've been thinking about them. And so she's also got this parallel career in music, which I'm equally excited to talk about.
Oh, really?
Well, not so much your career, but how it feeds into your ideas of setting and place and environment. Pink Mountain on Locust Island is a book that stayed with me for a really long time. I feel like it's one of those books that really, like, it got under my fingernails and into the pores of my skin. There's something really visceral and equally something quite surreal and hallucinatory about it that I really loved. I can really kind of taste this like weird perfume in the way that certain smells like linger in your nose for hours after you've left them. And so I'm really excited that Jamie could join us tonight. And I can't wait to get stuck into a bit of a chat. As I mentioned, this week, Jamie and I are talking about place, environment, setting, all of those good things. This is interactive. It will be put on YouTube. If you would like to revisit it at any time, you can see our beautiful faces, our party bunting, our high-tech setup, anytime you like for inspiration. In the meantime, this evening, if you would like to ask questions, and we would really love you to do so, so that it's not just me asking like my personal points of interest to Jamie, you can do so via Twitter using the hashtag EM, capital E, capital M Toolkits. You can also ask questions via the Express Media Facebook page, and I will do my best to field them. I won't answer them, I'll give them to Jamie. Wonderful. Let's get started.
Yeah,
before we kind of get into some questions, I wanted to ask for people who might not have read the book yet.
Yes.
And I want you all to go out and do it. But could you just talk a little bit about the book? Not necessarily give a synopsis if you don't want to, but could you just kind of give the potted version or a little explanation?
It's hard. Bad at doing this. Yeah. I think the way I like to describe it is that it's about arts, drugs, and religion is usually what I say. And then I'd say that it's kind of very to do with the like psychology of like a young 15-year-old girl experiencing how things that are both like how do you even describe all those things, religion, art, and drugs, how things that are like quite intangible pleasures, like how they like are quite tangible in like a capitalist sort of society. Yeah, and like that's kind of like how I like to talk about it in a subtext kind of way. I like to talk about it in like a real kind of way because I just feel, yeah. So like that's kind of what, and it's quite experimental as well. Yeah, that's what. Which is what I always say as well.
Like it's a disclaimer.
Don't read it if you're not into this kind of,
But it's experimental in a way that feels, like I think it's experimental, I think, in the way that the best experimental fiction is. I think at its worst, or the reason why I will occasionally steer clear of experimental fiction or put a book down is if it feels like it's doing something to be gimmicky or just for the sake of it.
Which is like fine, like with this book in particular, like I did write it while I was studying creative writing. So it is very much like I was in the space of like, you know, being an academic and, you know, trying new things because like that's what academia like encourages you to do. So like I will admit that, like, you know, this was a product of that, but at the same time it's like, to me it's also something that I believed should be published like in our sort of community, like, I don't know.
Well, I think it feels like when you read this, it feels like it couldn't have been told any other way.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like, to me, that's like a mark of successful experimental fiction. It makes me excited. It makes me wish there was more of that out there. Could I ask you to read a little excerpt for us?
Yes, I will. So,
this is...
I'm going to be reading just like a section that I think really suits the theme of this workshop, and it is called Elevator Music. Because Monk at the time is looking through a music store. And that is the context, I think. Yeah.
Monk is our main character.
Monk is our protagonist, All right. Elevator music. At the music store, I ask for elevator music. They ask what I mean by elevator music. I explain, you know what they play in elevators? I hum a little. They tell me, people play all kinds of things in elevators. Are you an idiot? Meanwhile, Santa Coy is looking at something else. It's a Horace Silver record. He picks it up. A man with open arms, a dome. The sort of softness and little maracas. Little maracas. A guitar stepping on hot stones. The store clerk directs me to the section with a sign that says Bossa Nova. I buy 3 CDs using the money Auntie Linda gave me to buy lunch. I take them back to her apartment, play them on a little stereo in the living room. It's dark and steamy in here. It's not an elevator, but a silo of elastic sexiness and beachsides in Europe and tossing cherry tomatoes in a big stone bowl and late nights next to tiny flame candles in a black silk dress and a pier made of cobble and tar and tripping over because of the shiny red wine inside the purring throat and a purple sky and holding hands with each finger, interrupted and late night espressos in tiny cups at the hotly lamped booth couches while the barista sweeps between circle tables. And should we go so that they can close up? But the music is still swelling, so maybe they don't mind us. And a simmering breeze outside the door, but it's summer, so the heat weaves between our arms and torsos and in the curves between our necks. And we wonder if the night's finished, but there are still wine glasses tinkering upstairs. Inside blurred windows, apricots from the censer light let people know they'll be coming back to sell them suits and handkerchiefs and the little felt hats in the morning. The river is black goo. It's Astrid Gilberto, Stan Getz, a Paul Desmond collaboration. In the kitchen, SBS News is on, and Auntie Linda chops yams at the bench. She asks me what I've been doing lately. I tell her it's none of her business.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Something that kind of really hit me with this novel, and something that is evinced in that particular passage, is this profound sense of claustrophobia.
Yeah.
And I mean that in the most complimentary possible way. There's this almost sense of airless suffocation, and by the same token, it never becomes kind of tedious or boring for the reader.
I haven't.
Not at all. I was wondering if you could, I don't know, like speak a little bit about that sense of compression. Is it something you tried to evoke from the first, or?
I think, yeah, so there are moments when you first discover something and I don't know, you become like entirely obsessed with it. And I think that's what like teenage years, like that's completely what it is. And like I had that with music. I'm sure everybody has it with music. And so I feel like that particular chapter, it's definitely about feeling like you're in two places at once. And that's like, even though it's like quite a freeing feeling, it's quite claustrophobic because of that obsession that we have like immediately, because we haven't, it's like an undiscovered joy kind of thing. And so, yeah, like it's interesting because with that particular scene, it's quite an open scene that's being evoked to Monk, but it's claustrophobic because, yeah, it's obsessive as well.
I guess that kind of hyperfixation is something that takes you out of your everyday, but it still locks you into a place of obsession, like you say. And I think what is kind of fascinating about this passage in particular is that it starts with the elevator music, and then we're back with Auntie Linda, and this really, we go from, you know, these very like sexy and heady images of like, I don't know, some fancy European holiday to, you know, this kind of dimly lit or fluorescent lit, I assume, kitchen. And the yam slicing.
Yeah, yam slicing. Yeah, it's interesting because I think that's how a lot, like, I guess people ask you, like, you know, whenever you write a fiction book, whether, you know, you've actually been to the places or whether you've experienced the experiences. And for me, it's like, I guess that is one of the scenes where it is quite accurate about, you know, my generation growing up and my sort of experience, just in the sense that it's like, you're in two places at once all the time. And like, the moments that you do recall about place are often the moments where it's like a hinge. And so like the fact that we start in the music store, looking for elevator music, it opens up when you listen to it, and then you're back in like reality. Yeah, they're almost like dot points, because I'm very much like a writer who lists, and like I like dot points, like I like bullet points. So for me, it's very much about like, especially with memory, and especially being this age where everything happens so quickly and we don't really necessarily think about journaling things down. I think it's very much about, yeah, like all the little hinges that take us to the moments that we do ultimately remember, and like places are associated with like that opening up feeling.
Yes.
Yeah.
What about that sense of kind of, I think that speed that you're talking about, which is only ever getting greater. I think sometimes I mean, I know that as a teenager, I sometimes had these feelings of nostalgia for what was happening in the present moment.
Yeah.
Like this longing,
sure.
this knowledge that I was going to miss what I was experiencing
Yeah,
at that moment.
Yeah, for sure.
And so there's this strange thing that happens. Like, this is just also a very like emo teen thing to do. But there's also that knowledge that, you know, this moment, whether it's kind of profound or pleasurable or surprising or moving in some way, the knowledge that you kind of want to capture that and hold on to it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we go through waves where that happens. Like, I know with like Monk as a character, the moments that she does hold on to are very, I think her expectations of people are a lot like smaller than what they're supposed to be, kind of thing. How do I say it? Yeah, so like, I don't know, did you write diaries when you were a teenager?
I didn't, but I had kind of other ways of keeping track of things.
Did you write fiction instead of diaries on it?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, so like, if I looked back now at like a journal that I had when I was like 15, it would be like the really sort of big things that are minuscule things now. And that's what I find funny, because I would write down the big things, which are actually sort of minuscule in the sense that you experience them a lot later on in life. Not to like diminish them, because I think it's really beautiful that we cite those moments, but I'll never write down like the place, or I'll never write down the mood or the specific details of it. I'll just write down the one big thing, or like I'll highlight the one big thing that I see is like relative to everyone, which I guess is like drawing on nostalgia. I don't know. Yeah. So I don't know.
So then, how do you like excavate those memories then, either as a writer or as a human?
I think, I don't know. Like, I don't go back and read diaries or anything. Yeah. Like, I didn't for this book, but I just remember that feeling of needing to like write everything down, like real quickly, but like not necessarily putting it in context of everything. Yes. And I think that's where the sense of like staccato-ness comes from in the book, and that's like, you know, the same thing, like going from a music shop to being in the music to being in Auntie Linda's kitchen, like that sort of pace. Yeah,
I mean, sometimes that's how it feels as a teenager as well, and especially when like this kind of leads into my next question as well, but when you're a teenager in particular, or a child, I guess, your life is circumscribed by this fairly narrow series of places and events most of the time.
Yeah.
And so unless you know, you've grown up in an atmosphere of particular instability, for most of us there are certain kind of there's like a grid of environments that we just continue to move around, and a grid of people that we continue to interact with. And that's really important, because hopefully that's providing things like stability and attachment and you know, education and all of that stuff. But I think as a child, that's all well and good, and then by the time you're a teenager, it can start to feel really close to you. And I think sometimes you start to want to push the boundaries of those, not even necessarily in a rebellious way, but sometimes it's just about finding out what's outside of that grid.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That might kind of brings me to my next question, which is that, like, I don't know if I can articulate this very well, so bear with me.
No, that's fine.
I was thinking a lot about kind of the idea of, I mean, there's the classic image of like the teenager is isolated and thinking that nobody understands them, which, you know, is often true, not always. But I was thinking about how like puberty and adolescence really is this, you just on this like little peninsula of land by yourself. Really. It's such a strange and atomized experience. And I was thinking about kind of adolescence's setting almost, both temporal and, if not physical, then figurative, you know, that sense of sometimes being much closer to things, or sometimes being much further away from things or from people than we'd like to be. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and how that plays into, like, about Monk's claustrophobia, I guess.
Right. I think with Monk, it's definitely about expectation. I don't know, I think Monk has had a quite an unstable like childhood and everything, leading up to like teenage years. And it's kind of like that thing of thinking that, you know, it's like it's been the worst that it can be.
Yes.
And so it's like it becomes that thing of trying to find the good from now on. Like, I don't know, I feel like as young adults, like we tend to like marker things like now it's like New Year's resolutions, like now it's going to be good, or now it's, I think that's the whole attitude of Monk throughout the book, in that like there's little scenes in like the shopping center, there's little scenes in like the motel, and she tends to make like the best out of them because of that unstable childhood, and her like father being an artist and her auntie being heavily religious. I think that is like one of the attitudes is like hold on to like the little things and like look at the details. And I think that's where Monk gets like, you know, her lens of like seeing the surroundings that she's in. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Like her aunt and, to, you know, in a different way, her dad have these icons, and she's building her own iconography out of the kind of minutiae of her world.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask if the Chinatown of the book, whether it's based on a real place or whether it might be an amalgamation of a bunch of different places, or whether it's wholly invented. There are kind of these little clues, like even in the passage that you just read, there was a reference to SBS being on the TV.
Yeah, right.
Which, you know, hints at an Australian setting maybe, or somewhere perhaps where SBS is on a cable channel or whatever.
Yeah, right.
But can you talk a little bit about that?
I think I've always, so I say this a lot, but like I've always liked not naming places, just because I've never felt completely, I think just as a person, I'm quite, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome. It's what sounds like imposter syndrome. Not really, it's not really imposter syndrome, but it's the sense that I'm always looking for the authority to write about a place.
Right.
And like, just because like I've never felt like I've had that authority, which doesn't exist, I don't think, anymore. Like I don't think you need to have an authority over a place to write about it. But as like a young person, I did think that. And so I would always be like, because I very much grew up on American television. My parents are from Hong Kong, which is like, you know, a mix of China and Britain as well. So like there's always been that sort of like disconnection, or like not disconnection, but like sort of half-heartedness almost of like identity. And so for me, it was very much like a conscious decision to put everything as like an amalgamation of like a Western city and then a Chinatown inside of a Western city. And so when I wrote Pink Mountain, I was in Melbourne, and I wasn't thinking of Melbourne. And then I was editing it in San Francisco, which also like has trams, and you'll see trams being mentioned in the book. Yeah. And like and then I got to the Chinatown there and spent Chinese New Year there. And I was like, wow, this is where it is, like to me. Yes. To me, like it's also interesting because it's also where my biological granddad has ended up, I think. We think, like in the family, we don't know where he is, but we think he's in San Francisco. Right. And it was just like a weird moment, because then I was in San Francisco editing the book, like, and thinking of Melbourne. So it's like one of those things where it's like I had an idea in my head, and because like of all the stimulus that I had for this book, which like I was watching movies that were set in New York, you know, songs that were recorded, you know, in, like wherever, like in Hong Kong. I was just thinking of like, there's so much sort of, there's like a range of information that we have about everywhere. And I think that feeds into the way I write, just as a writer generally, not even about the book. Because of, my fear of writing a specific place. But yeah, so I think it's definitely one of those things where I didn't want to be specific, even in like when we were editing it, and you know, Sam, my editor, was like, should we make it specific? Should we not? And then I had to think about, like, I had to deconstruct why I didn't want it to be specific, and I think it's because of like because of the character Monk, and in the sense that she was very limited to like her views, and like when you sort of living in one place at one time, you do look for like other things, and you don't like to think of the fact that there are other places. Yes. I don't know, yeah. And for me, I really like to write in a way that evokes nostalgia as well. So it came out naturally without being like having a place, and then it was edited with me saying that's important to the character.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's not that like it has a super strong sense of place, and it doesn't. Not once did I think this needs to be identified. And like, for instance, I didn't read it. Dimensions of Trams, for instance, didn't necessarily say Melbourne to me, though that's the only Australian city. I mean, they exist in Adelaide, I guess. It wasn't that it was important. It was, and in fact, I now, thinking about this book, it's almost as though, I think before when I said the word hallucinatory, I think the city in this book, or the world of this book, almost becomes like a dream, in a way that if I then found out it was, say, San Francisco or Melbourne, like wherever, it would almost be disappointing to me, because I would want to go to that place, or like pin down the locations of the book
because
to what I knew.
The city is a very big part of it,
exactly.
which is why it's like, which is, exactly what you said. That's really interesting, because when I wrote it, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, even if I did call this, like where I thought it was going to be, it would make me just want to think of like, somewhere else that I was finding memories from, because a lot of the moods in the book are from like everywhere. Like I've lived in a lot of different places, and it's one of those things where as a person that age, like 15, you want to find connections through all the places that you have been, and you want to, and so I think, it's good that it kind of felt like hallucinatory, because that's kind of what it's like when you don't have a solid idea of what's outside of your like bubble.
Yes.
Yeah,
but it makes your bubble no less real.
For sure. Like,
what for you, like what sort of detail, I suppose as a writer, but also as when you're reading other people's work, what kind of detail is it that really evokes a sense of your setting, whether it's climate or environment or kind of physical detail?
I think it's definitely I think it's definitely something I think it's definitely something to do with like the references. I think
there are so many references.
And I think that's what makes it like even references to music and movies. It's like, oh, where would you have the freedom to find the knowledge on those like musicians and those? And so for me, it's like about references, and branding is a huge thing. Like my next 2 books is very much like transparent about like the amount of branding that is in it. Like it's just interesting because rather than like talking about a specific place, it's about what you call like a corner store, or like what you call and like the way that you say that, because Fuji does take place in specific different places. I think it's definitely the branding, that sort of the branding, and also probably the weather as well. Like the climate.
I feel like that's such a big one. And like the way that certain weather smells even is so different.
True. And like I love to sort of explore what, like, I love to hear when like readers like, are used to other climates, like whether they understand it still. Like it's super interesting to me.
I mean, even I've been thinking a lot recently about dialogue and regionalized dialogue, and something that it can often feel very forced or fake.
For sure.
Like vernacular can tip over very quickly.
I think that's happening quite a lot, just purely because of like the internet, and like it's. I like don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a good thing.
No.
It's just like one of those things that is now. So like it's interesting when you get people reading like this book, and there's like sort of Americanized language or like Americanized references, and it's like well, there could be either, because there are probably American people that don't use that language either. And it's like very, it's all very sort of to do with the age that it's just happened in the last few years. And this isn't like placed in time either.
Yeah,
so,
I noticed that.
Yeah, so it's like one of those things where it's like testing, you know, testing, I guess, the environment that we live in today. Very much the place and setting of this book is just like, you know, the now, like the globalized sort of now. Yeah.
Was that as deliberate as the decision not to name the place?
I think so. Because for me, Monk became very much like a character that grabbed onto all the information that she had handed to her. And that is something that I feel like I did as a teenager. And like I always use this anecdote, but my little sister, you know, once came up to me and just like knew something very specific about a street in New York. And I was like, oh, like, cool, we've never been, like our family, we've never been. And so it's like, it's just really interesting to me how we have that access to like visualizing like a place that's existing now. Like, so I don't know, it's that's sort of where Monk's character comes from, and like sort of knowing everything and relating it to like being within like a globalized community kind of thing. Yeah.
It's so fascinating. No. If I'm following your meaning, I think it makes total sense. And it's something that I think about a lot, because people love to talk about how, you know, like, oh my God, I read a comment on an Overland article yesterday about how it was like, that's whatever the reason was, is why writers under 35 in Australia aren't reading books set in Australia or something like that. Or, you know, it was just that writers under 35. So readers under 35 aren't reading in Australia.
Right.
And I was like, oh, like I know so many, like most of my peers.
What was the answer?
They were talking about how it was Jane Rawson's article on the Vogel not being awarded this year, and I believe the comment was something like, young Australians don't read because there aren't enough books set in Australia, or something along those lines. And it was quite puzzling to me, the whole thing, the comment itself. But just the idea, I mean, that argument or thesis is one, like leaving that totally aside, the idea that like young Australians aren't reading is so funny to me, because it implies that, I mean, everybody I know is like hyper-literate in some way, and not necessarily that they're going to bookstores and reading books. I certainly think we could have a much healthier literary ecology in terms of like published fiction, non-fiction, essays, poetry. But we consume tremendous amounts of text each day.
Yeah, exactly.
And more so than ever before, like what you just said about, you know, being surprised that your sister could identify a particular aspect of a street or knew this level of detail about a New York street. I feel like I have that constantly, where people who are older than people who are of a certain generation will it will not occur to them that I or somebody younger than me might know a particular piece of information. It's like when an older person is like, there was this really great band once, Creedence Clearwater Revival, and you're like, I've had it flogged to me my whole life, or whatever it is, you know? Like back in my day, we listened to the Beatles, and the rest of us are like, we fucking listened to the Beatles, like you have thrashed it. Like we know, I against my will know every Beatles lyric there is to know. And we also have 40 more decades of musical knowledge. It's like a cumulative thing. Whereas many people of a certain generation, I say everybody, but will stop accumulating knowledge outside of a very narrow sphere of interest or vocational whatever.
Right. Yeah, no, that's so interesting, because it's like, it's almost like, it's like that thing where we are interested in something, then we skim past it so quickly as well. Like we sort of, like, I don't remember like the last movie I watched. Sometimes I'll like look at a cover and be like, have I watched that? Or something like that. And that's like very, very much like a thing of our generation that I always like forget about, that the previous generation didn't have, just because of our access to it. And then I guess that like is like, again, like to do with like the book being nameless, as in the book being set in a place that is nameless, because it's very much like that is what defines monk, and that is what defines monk's age that she lives through consuming. And like her consumption is what defines her everyday thoughts. It's not necessarily like the things around her. Things around her is just what is the things around her and what is deemed as sort of normal. And like her body is just something that and like her body in the geographical space is just something that she sort of like carries around after she's finished, like, you know, like listening to music, being on the internet, like being in a chat with So yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and I think like there are criticisms to be made of that as well. Like the idea, I certainly feel like I engage with things much more superficially than, you know, say I might have 5 or even 2 years ago.
Yeah, right.
But by the same token, it's like breadth versus depth, and it's not pitting one against the other.
No, like, it's just the way it is, kind of thing. It's just like the attitude we have, and I think almost like while we're talking about this, it's kind of also the way that I consciously try to write. So like I always say this whenever someone asks about my routine, but I like always will have like 5 different things that I'm reading at once, watching and listening to music. Just because I know that like that is like, I'm just sort of deliberately putting myself in that position, because I know that I'm writing a character of this time, who does have information and does have like a sort of stream of consciousness that runs like that. And I think it's very important to like reflect that like stream of consciousness and that mode of thought, because it is like it is relatable, I think. And to read like new literature is to sort of challenge the way that we think about ourselves thinking. So I think that's sort of something I try to do as like a personal preference. Like I try to channel that sort of routine, just because like that is sort of sometimes how we feel, like, you know, listening to something, then watching something that contradicts what we're listening to, you know, like contradictory stimulus, I guess.
And bouncing our attention between each one of those things.
And how we sort of deal with that when we're on our own as well.
And dividing your attention in ways that aren't necessarily productive.
Yeah, for sure.
Like trying to,
because not everyone is like also like just like writing as well. So like it's interesting sort of being in the minds of characters that don't sort of need all that information. They sort of take it like into themselves, because I find like often because I like write, I love to write. Because I love to write, like I find that the information I do take from like a movie or something, I'm always like I'm kind of like, oh, am I allowed to say dickhead on this?
I think I just said fuck.
Oh, okay, yeah, so kind of dickheady about it, and I'm just like, you know, I can sort of use that, whereas a lot of people, like, I guess it's like the claustrophobia of having like a movie that sort of, and they think about themselves and they think about the world, whereas I'm immediately just like, oh yeah, this suits like something I do. So it's really interesting to get into the heads of characters who are like that and do take things like that they consume like into their everyday or into their sort of perception of the world. And yeah, I do that as well, but like it's just interesting having that filter of being a writer.
And I think it's like a special kind of weird sometimes to think that not everyone really metabolizes stuff that way.
It's
like, what must it be like to not have that lens? And I don't even mean that in
I admire it because that's like sort of my safety thing as well. Yeah, it's kind of like that's not real. I can fiction or non-fiction.
Yes.
Yeah. I feel vulnerable.
I know, me too. I think I feel a bit sick. What kind of, I don't know, this is a difficult question, and I don't know that I would like to be asked it, but what kind of comes first for you? Is it like, do you think the story grows out of the place, or does the character come to you first, or where does it kind of begin?
With this book, it was definitely the character first. I think you can probably tell. With the next 2 books I'm writing, it was I wanted to challenge myself and be like, I'm gonna locate it, and I'm gonna start with the location. So Gunk Baby is sort of very much like, I knew it was like suburbia, and I knew the places that I was like referring to in it immediately. And yeah, the next two are very much about place.
Yeah.
So like, I think I just like to challenge myself in what comes first. Like that obviously happened naturally as well. But then like, you know, as a writer, you have to have like your sort of plot brain, and then your like sort of flowing brain. And I guess that's just the way it's ended up. And it is always between the two though. It is always like character, place, time, not so much for me, but like, yeah, character and place, definitely. I do end up being conscious of one being like first, eventually.
I think sometimes, they do feed into each other as well. That was why I said, sorry, when I said this is a difficult question, I like setting up to do something really emotional and personal. What I meant was that like sometimes it's not as clear cut as that.
Yeah,
and especially in a book like this where the setting almost is a character.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think with this one it was a lot more sort of, is transient the right word for the setting? I'm not sure. No, it's a lot more sort of up in the air is what I meant.
Like nebulous maybe?
Yeah. Whereas the next two, like what I'm working on right now, it's very much like, it is like like I'm reading this book called The Life and Death of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs. Yeah, I just came across it one day. Like I don't think it's very popular, but it's very much, there's a chapter called Sidewalks Comfort and then Sidewalks Security. I think something like that. And it's just all about the sort of science of sidewalks. And like, I've become really interested because it's one of those things, it's like, it's something I've been avoiding, like thinking about place and more thinking about like psychology, but like now like thinking about place and how it affects your psychology.
Yeah.
And it sort of talks about suburbs and cities in the sense that like what, like our possessiveness over like, you know, our places, and like how far does the radius of our own place extend to, and especially sort of like in the sense of racial sort of politics and that as well. And that's been really interesting because that defines a lot of the characters that I'm writing. And growing up in like a suburb, as like, you know, a person of color, like how, like even like a woman of color, and even just like women, like how does the sort of compression of like a suburb or like the sidewalk or like how you're treated, what you feel like you need to do in order to make yourself applicable or like comfortable on the sidewalk. Because it's like, I don't know, it's one of those things where it's like if you're walking a dog, then you can be on the sidewalk. If you know, have a backpack on and you look like you're going or coming home, you're like allowed on the sidewalk. And to me, that very much defines you as like a person, I guess subconsciously. And so in that sense, like place is definitely feeding into like the kind of person you are under, what do you call it, like pressure, I guess. Not pressure, but like in the most sort of human sense. Yeah,
that idea of which places or which spaces we have access to or feel entitled to, if any.
And that comes through in this as well.
Totally.
Yeah, like culturally, in the cultural sense. Yeah. Because a lot of people in Chinatown go to Chinatown to eat Chinese food or like, you know, go to experience Chinese-ness or like Asian-ness, I guess, because there are like Japanese stores and everything in Chinatown, which is interesting, which is also something that I was like looking into in the book as well. So it's that thing, of like designated spaces.
And the idea of like, I mean, Chinatown, for example, is a kind of having this metonymic quality for an exoticized other, you know, it's just, it's not even like,
for sure.
It's not even Chinatown, it's just this monolithic
Shangri-La
of like Korean barbecue and
it's very like Orientalist sort of
totally.
like which is interesting for like a Chinese character to live inside of, like literally. So and to experience it's almost, it's that, I think before we started maybe you used the word inception, and it's almost like that kind of telescoped view
of
Yeah, for
like
sure.
you're inside you're observing, I don't even know how to say this, but you're observing this kind of exoticized space as an exoticized person potentially from inside.
And then also trying to somehow remove yourself, because I feel like something that you get as like a woman of color is, I'm not sure, or even just like, it's like when you go through your tomboy phase, because like femininity is like so forced upon you that you try to like switch it around, and that's kind of what Monk does with her culture, I think, a lot in the book, because like, you know, it's kind of like she tries to flip it because geographically she can't flip it. She's like still living at home, and like, you know, culturally she can't really flip it, so it's kind of becomes an aesthetic thing. It's like that scene where she has like the feline girl tongue. I don't know if you remember it. Yeah, and she like sort of wears this different look, like a very different look, and that she doesn't think she would be seen to be wearing. Yeah, she has to kind of, I mean, subvert is such a subvert,
that's exactly
essentially, exactly.
Do we have any? I will just keep going.
Just keep talking.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, are there any, this is something I'm thinking about a lot because I am working on an essay at the moment that kind of looks at, it's really hard to explain because I don't know what it is. But I'm working on an essay that kind of looks at the motel, I guess, in the American psyche versus the Australian psyche. And what it kind of occupies in terms of film and media, but also in terms of the imaginative sphere.
I love that. I've been really interested in that as well.
Well, in 5 years, I'm sure you can bang one out really quickly when I'm finally finished. But it's something that motels for me is something that I've always kind of returned to, both literally and physically. Like I enjoy the experience.
Do you tend to like book into motels rather than like Airbnb still?
Sometimes, yeah. I just did a little road trip through some of the southern states in the US, Tennessee, and Alabama, and Arkansas, and I was really conscious of I don't know, like. There was one particular place where I stayed, and I think I actually got bitten by bed bugs, which is like almost, it's one of those things that I couldn't put in the essay because it would be reached too far. But it was like quintessential, like really seedy motel. And there were people, like I felt like I was in a film staying there. Anyway.
That's so interesting,
It's just for some reason, ever since I was a kid, like that's an image that, or a space that I always come back to. And it's so ubiquitous in kind of like, you know, from the noir film to, that it's almost, that's part of this essay that I'm writing. It's like, doesn't even kind of bear interrogating. It's like this iconic thing. But I wanted to ask you if there are any kind of spaces or settings that you kind of return to time and time again, whether in this book or just more generally in your work.
I don't think so. I actually think I do the opposite.
Like push out to find new places?
Oh, like, do you mean physical places?
No, sorry, I mean places that you feel drawn to writing about or thinking about.
Oh, yeah, like definitely like Los Angeles, just because it's always like, it's just been like prevalent, like, you know, growing up on Disney, and it's just one of those places you always want to go as a kid, like just to sort of like be amidst it. And it just like, there are photos of me there from when I was like 3 and 4, because we sort of were there for a bit. And like, it's just interesting, like having, it's like what I was sort of mentioning before this, like sort of like the false memories and sort of like, it's like I have photos but I don't remember being there. And it's just one of those places that, like, you know, everyone talks about, and that's where it's just really fascinating to me just to like explore like the dynamic of the place. And I went there, I think I was there last year. Yeah, I was there last year. And just the fact that it's nothing like, you know, what it's portrayed to be is really interesting to me. And so Fuji is like the next book I am sort of like exploring that, just because I'm just really curious and like fascinated about it. but that's a very specific place. There's nowhere that like I feel really inclined to always explore, except I'm really into suburbs right now, so I guess that is something that's quite similar. With this book, not so much. Yeah, because again, very focused on like character and dynamic and relationships, but yeah. I think I'm a bit obsessed with suburbs and shopping centres right now.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, I love shopping centres. I forgot for a second. I was like, what am I obsessing over right now? But yeah, it's shopping centres.
Like malls or like strip malls?
Like indoor, like just like, because that's another thing with the sidewalk thing. It's like we have all the stores in one place, and that's quite greedy because we could spread these stores and everything out on the sidewalks, but they don't want to spread them out. Yeah, exactly. So that just is also very fascinating.
I was talking to a landscape architect recently about in the United States the kind of rise of the outdoor mall as a concept.
Right.
And we have a couple of them. Like I know there's a really big one, Pacific Fair or whatever it is in Surfers Paradise or near Surfers Paradise. Yeah. And I'm sure there are others, but just this idea of like not an outdoor market, an outdoor shopping centre. Yeah, like the Grove. Exactly. I was just like a fountain.
It's just so extravagant. And I'm like, this is amazing. It changes like the whole experience.
But it simulates the idea of, it completely shuts down that thing that you get when you go to like Chadstone or Southland or West like High Point, where it's just fluorescent lights and you lose all sense of time because you're outside, there's fresh air, the birds are singing. Yeah, you can feel the elements.
Fitzgerald is like playing like from the fountain.
Yeah, and so it's this crazy thing that happens where it's almost like they've worked out now how to keep us there by truth. Like 50 years ago,
they were the opposite kind of thing. Yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah.
Sorry, we had an audience question.
Oh yes.
How do you know when to give up on a piece or a project that isn't working? That's a really good question. Sorry, that was Jess. Thank you, Jess.
Thank you, Jess. For me, it's very much like immediate. Yeah, like I'm lucky in the sense that I kind of know immediately, but I have written. So when I was a teenager, I wrote novels. So this might not be helpful information because I didn't really I didn't think about it as much in the sense that I was writing. It was more of like a very like unconscious thing that I did. But I would write up to like 10,000 words before I sort of stopped, and that would mainly be because I found myself stopping a lot. But I didn't ever like delete them or anything. Like I never deleted the files, just because like you return to those ideas and what you had in those 10,000 words might influence what you do next and like what you have next. And those ideas are so important. Like I'm a big fan of just like filing things away and returning to them and not starting them again, maybe starting them again, but which I actually did for Gump Baby. So yeah, I think it's really important to do that. But what about you? Like, do you?
I'm a big fan of putting it to the side and not thinking about it. So like I'm the same. I wrote a couple of novels when I was a teenager, and I feel like that was a really good apprenticeship. I feel like that teaches you how to
like stop.
Exactly. And it's funny because like I'm sure this happens to you, and everyone's like, "This is your first book," and of course, you would never be like, well, actually, I had my Word document. But that's how I feel as well. Like my first book, the first published book, but like I had like hundreds of thousands of other words. And that was me teaching myself how to write.
To stop, and it's like it's super important to acknowledge that as well, because it's like what you do end up getting published is very deliberate. There are so many chances to like opt out almost.
Or like fix things.
And like in the future you might want to like wish that you had opted out on the first book. Like I don't know like how like critical you are of your book, but like or your like debut. But like I'm already very critical of this, and it's like, but I'm glad I didn't stop at the same time, because it's like I think you sort of do have a feeling when you're writing that like it's going to work, and then you don't even have to go with it. It's just one of those things where it's like you should see through all your thoughts before you stop, and you should return to your thoughts.
I think also having the confidence to or not confidence is the wrong word, but sometimes, and this is a really hard thing, I didn't learn this until like I've been writing for years and years and years, but sometimes now, I do feel a little bit better about asking other people for their opinion.
Yeah, right.
And it's really, like, I used to be so nervous about showing. Like, when I was in tape, I used to spew each week before workshopping because I was so nervous.
Literally, yeah. No,
Yeah, truly, like, it's
the funny thing is, like, the first time I ever had to speak in class, like, I didn't even put up my hand to answer questions, was reading the first chapter of this book. Yeah, so that's interesting that you say that, yeah, because after I read it out, I was like, okay, nothing else can go wrong. I'm going to show like my boyfriend. I'm going to like show like, you know, other people that might like my brother. I think I sent him like, you know, half of the book when it was being, it was the first time I ever did that as well. So that also
that's
really
a really helpful thing. Like, and it has to be someone you can, whose opinion you
Yeah.
care enough about, or you trust. And it has to be somebody.
Even the act of showing someone is also like, it makes you question. It's like going through the editing process.
Exactly.
I mean, like, why did I do this? And like, why did I write like this? And why do I want to show them as well?
And sometimes that can tell you whether or not to give up on a project.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
If there's enough in it and you realise that actually it is worth persisting with, I'm just really stuck right now, that can be a really valuable thing.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. We have another question from Grace, who is one of our participants this year.
Oh, hi, Grace.
She says, hello, and then your Twitter username, which is catalog03.
I don't know why it's that.
Something that really struck me in Pink Mountain on Locust Island was the really visceral presence and description of food. Yes. Could you talk a little about food in Pink Mountain and your relationship with food in your writing?
My relationship with
And then there's the emoji of the new
That's so cute. Yeah, I think with food, it's that cultural designation again. Like, food is like a way of like appreciating a culture on like a level that is kind of safe, almost. Like, safe is not really the exact word I'm looking for, but yeah. But I think food is also, for me, it's like not only about sort of culture, but I guess it's also about branding. So like, and like with branding, that also means like the choices we make. Like, food is very much like the choices we make at the supermarket, the choices we make when we're out. It kind of like, it's almost very like, it's very personal, but it's also quite a performative thing as well. So with food, it's very much like,
well, we keep getting mood lighting.
I know.
What about like the commodification of certain, like the commodification, for example, of like the idea of a home cooked meal, or the idea of like certain cuisines being commodified, like the idea of, I don't know, I'm searching for examples now and can't think of any, but the idea of, you know, what dumplings connotes, for instance, or what a kind of lean cuisine connotes versus, I don't know, chicken and waffles or whatever. You know, that everything has kind of become this stand-in for some other meaning.
Right. I think, I don't know, it's in a way, like, I don't want to say intimacy, but like intimacy kind of has to do with it almost. Like, I don't know, try to think of like an example in real life. I guess without thinking, like subconsciously, it's like interesting because my grandpa on my dad's side will cook spaghetti bolognese with Frankfurt sausages and sugar, which is like tomato and sugar is also like something that is in Hong Kong, like a baked tomato pork chop rice. And so like it's weird because as a kid I'm like, oh, he's cooking like Western meals, like he's at the time like being very like internal, like having internalized racism. I was like, oh, like cool, like I like these meals.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so it's kind of like one of those things that as a kid, like having internalized racism, that's kind of like the way I thought. And then my grandma would cook these meals with like yams, turnips, and like shapes that I just didn't understand what they were because at supermarkets you don't really see them in their forms. And so it's kind of like that thing of intimacy, because now that my grandma has passed, it's like one of those things that if I ever see that meal replicated, which likely I won't, because Cantonese cooking is very specific, it's going to trigger like a deeper emotion than if I saw a place that she lived, or if it's because it's that multi-sensory kind of thing.
It's food is so like it's by definition nourishing.
Yeah,
and if somebody is preparing
Yeah.
you a meal, it's because they want to feed you and they want to take care of you, and especially when it's someone like a grandparent. That is a very sort of primal and visceral thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I also mentioned like this scene about the buffet as well. Yeah, which is also
so good. Sorry, I somehow forgot it.
Yeah, but it's just interesting, like sort of like the different ways that we behave as well around different kinds of environments that involve food, and like compared to like a young child, for example, which is very like contained. Like we get 3 things and then we drink the tea. It's like. Yeah, it's like it's just interesting in those different environments, which was kind of subconscious in the book. So I'm glad that you asked that question, Grace.
It's food for me was that was one of, in terms of like that multisensory aspect of your writing, that was one of the first things that I really like in the first, I don't know,
a
10
lot of
pages.
people have said that, which is funny because I it's one of those things that you think about when you're editing, not when you're
and you're like looking for repetition or whatever.
Yeah, people mention it and I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably why. That's what I love about editing as well, is that it's just very much picking your own brain and where you were at when you wrote it.
Yeah, it's like very revealing somehow. Before we wrap up this part of things, can I ask who, if any, are your favourite, I guess let's say contemporary writers, Australian or otherwise, who work really well in terms of creating a sense of setting, whether that's temporal setting or a sense of place?
That's really hard because I'm quite not a great reader, and so often like I'll pick something up and put it down again. But someone who keeps me in a place is definitely like Murakami. Yeah, just like if we're thinking about place purely, that is very vivid to me, I think. Yeah, and it's interesting because like I haven't been to a lot of the specific places in those books, but it's still very vivid. If I think about another author, it's hard thinking about authors.
Yeah, sorry, I hate getting put on the spot about authors.
Who am I thinking of? Contemporary authors.
Oh, like 20th century, 21st century.
I can't think of any others in terms of like if I'm thinking specifically about place.
I really put you on this spot.
No. It's like also a thing of when it's short fiction as well, because I'm thinking of like when I really am glued to like a sort of sustaining sort of scene. I find like with short fiction, I do that a lot, which is probably why like my first book was like very much like bullet pointed. Yeah, because I think that's, so that doesn't really answer your question, but it's an addition to like our conversation. But yeah, like short fiction, I guess, good short fiction. Short fiction as a form, kind of like if I wanted to stay in a place for really long, I would like read short fiction. I don't know. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, you're a short fiction writer, so
sometimes.
Yeah.
We have unfortunately run out of time, but thank you very much for joining us, Jamie.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, viewers at home, for joining us. Our next Toolkits Fiction live broadcast takes place on Thursday, the 13th of June, and then we'll be joined by Alison Evans. They are joining us to discuss voice, dialogue, perspective, point of view, all of that good stuff. So I hope you'll join us for that. And in the meantime, have a wonderful evening wherever you may be. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.